The night at Clearwater Lake was unusually tense. Retired General Darius Mitchell sat on his porch with a cup of coffee, the calm air feeling strangely heavy. Years of military instinct told him something was wrong. From the shadows near the lake, movement caught his eye. Figures, too steady, too coordinated to be random. Darius's grip tightened. This wasn't kids sneaking around. This was trained. The dog at his feet growled low, confirming his fear. Darius rose slowly, eyes sharp, every sense awake. The quiet night no longer felt peaceful. It felt like a battlefield waiting to erupt. He thought of the HOA troubles, the arguments, the threats whispered by smug neighbors. Could this be connected? The idea tightened his chest. A figure shifted closer, deliberate, careful, hunting. Darius muttered, "Not on my watch." Thunder rumbled in the distance as the intruders crept forward. The storm outside was nothing compared to the one building inside him. Darius squared his shoulders, ready. This wasn't just about property lines or HOA power games anymore. This was survival, and he had survived worse. The dawn over Clearwater Lake was sharp and crisp, each ray of sunlight cutting through the mist like a blade. Darius stood on his rebuilt dock, coffee steaming in his hands, eyes scanning the lake that had once been the stage of Brenda Whitmore's suburban tyranny. But today there was no fear, only anticipation. Today, justice would reach its final chapter. Kyle arrived, laptop in hand, face set with determination that no 16-year-old should have to carry. But somehow he did. "Major General, federal agents confirmed that Brenda's remaining network has been subpoenaed. This is it. Everything she's built, it's all coming down." Eleanor Henderson appeared behind them, carrying binders that seemed weightless in her arms but heavy with years of evidence, emails, spreadsheets, forged documents, and financial records. "We've documented every violation, every threat, every harassment report. There's no escape for her now." By mid-morning, families displaced by Brenda's reign of terror began arriving at the Riverside Estates Community Center. Mothers, fathers, veterans, elderly couples, over 200 people, some traveling hours, all united by one cause, reclaiming their community. Children clutched stuffed animals, veterans carried medals and flags, while seniors leaned on canes and each other. They weren't just witnesses. They were a living testament to Brenda's crimes. Darius felt the familiar edge of military precision settle over him. "Everyone knows the plan," he said. "Federal indictments are served, state charges follow, and community board removal happens simultaneously. Stay calm, stay coordinated, and let the truth do the work." At 11 a.m., federal marshals arrived at Brenda Whitmore's lakefront estate. She had attempted one final act of defiance, calling a press conference to spin herself as the victim, but the courtroom-ready agents ignored her theatrics. The cameras rolling outside her property captured her frantic pacing, phone glued to her ear, eyes wide with terror as the reality of federal justice dawned. By noon, she was formally served with multiple federal charges: civil rights violations, conspiracy, wire fraud, mail fraud, and racketeering. Agents documented each step, ensuring that the evidence chain was unbroken. Brenda's attorney argued furiously, trying to delay proceedings, but even his theatrics couldn't mask the overwhelming tide of documentation. Forged documents, surveillance footage, and financial records exposing her network of bribery and harassment. Back at the community center, Darius took the podium. "This is more than a legal victory," he said, voice echoing across the packed room. "It's a declaration that organized bullying, harassment, and corruption cannot survive when a community stands together. Today, we reclaim our homes, our safety, and our dignity." First to testify was Eleanor Henderson. Her voice was steady, recounting the years of subtle harassment escalating into blatant threats. "Brenda Whitmore destroyed my family's stability, our finances, and our sense of security, but today I reclaim all of that. The crowd erupted in applause. Tom Bradley followed, detailing how military families had been specifically targeted. She believed PTSD and military service made us vulnerable. She was wrong. We do not surrender to bullies. We organize against them. Then Kyle stood, the room falling silent. His voice was strong, unwavering. My mother taught me honesty, fairness, and respect. Then she violated every lesson she gave me. I love her, but I cannot support her actions against innocent families. His eyes swept the room, meeting neighbors and friends he'd grown to trust. I choose justice. The tension in Brenda Whitmore's face was unmistakable. Rage, panic, and disbelief. For the first time, she realized that her network had collapsed, her carefully orchestrated harassment campaign dismantled piece by piece. Federal prosecutors presented her forged court documents, fabricated HOA fines, and recorded communications with corrupt county officials. Every deception exposed, every lie accounted for. By 3 p.m., the state board vote occurred simultaneously. 127 votes for removal, 8 against, 3 abstentions. Brenda Whitmore's HOA control ended with a simple cardboard ballot box and the collective will of the community. Martha was elected HOA president unanimously, Eleanor Henderson became treasurer, and Tom Bradley assumed enforcement duties, ensuring no future abuses could occur. Brenda had one last desperate act. She attempted to file bankruptcy, claiming her debts were unmanageable. But federal civil rights violations and criminal charges could not be discharged. Her schemes had consequences, and there was no escaping them. As evening fell, federal marshals escorted Brenda Whitmore into custody. Her designer attire was wrinkled, hair streaked with gray, and eyes filled with the stark realization that her suburban empire was gone. "This isn't fair!" she screamed. But her words fell flat against the symphony of justice echoing through Clearwater Lake. Outside, the community erupted. Neighbors embraced, children played along the lakefront, and veterans saluted one another. For the first time in years, Clearwater Lake felt like home again. 6 months later, the community had transformed completely. Martha's leadership had implemented fair HOA policies, Eleanor Henderson audited every financial transaction, and Tom Bradley's veteran outreach programs flourished. Clearwater Veterans Scholarship Fund, built from Brenda's forfeited criminal proceeds, had raised $85,000, with Kyle as the first recipient. Kyle, now preparing for West Point, practiced fly casting on the lake with the focused determination of a future military lawyer. "Major General," he said, smiling at Darius, "I want to combine military service and law to protect families like ours." Darius smiled, pride radiating from him. "You've already learned the most important lessons: courage, justice, and standing up for others. No academy can teach that better than life itself." As the sun set, casting a purple-orange glow over Clearwater Lake, Darius reflected on the journey. From fear to courage, from chaos to community, from oppression to justice. The loons called across the water, the same sound his grandfather had loved. Only now, it echoed over a neighborhood reborn, through courage, unity, and the unwavering pursuit of justice. And somewhere, in the distance, the faint laughter of children, the chatter of neighbors, and the ripple of lake water reminded everyone that victory was sweetest when shared. The fog lingered over Clearwater Lake long after sunrise, refusing to lift as if the morning itself sensed the storm brewing over the suburban streets. Major General Daniel Harper sat in his cabin, his coffee untouched, eyes scanning his laptop screen. Surveillance footage from the previous night had been carefully reviewed, zoomed, enhanced, cross-referenced. Every shadow, every movement, every deliberate pause revealed more than just a simple break-in. Daniel leaned back, recalling what his old battalion commander had told him. Amateurs react. Professionals anticipate. Carver wasn't acting blindly. Every action, every threat, every fine had purpose. She had a strategy, and now he had to anticipate it before innocent families became collateral damage. He reached for his secure phone and dialed Tom Bradley. "Tom, we're going to need more eyes tonight. The last surveillance showed 2 intruders leaving a laptop and jewelry box at the Parker property. I need to know where those items came from." Tom's voice crackled with static. "Already on it. Reached out to a few contacts downtown. There are whispers Carver's got people she trusts for this type of work. Low-level crooks, petty criminals, people she can manipulate." Daniel felt a chill. The enemy had recruited, planned, and executed without a single mistake until now. But he had something Carver didn't: experience, intuition, and the unwavering loyalty of the community he had protected for years. By late afternoon, the Parker family had gathered at Daniel's cabin, a mix of fear and hope in their eyes. Alex's little sister clung to her mother, sensing the tension. "I can't believe she'd go this far," Mrs. Parker whispered, glancing at Daniel. "Why target us?" "Because you're a threat to her authority," Daniel said calmly, though his mind raced. "People like Carver believe control is everything. If you resist, she escalates." He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. "We're not going to let her win." Hours later, Daniel's phone buzzed with a secure message. It was from Eleanor Henderson, a retired accountant living 3 streets over. She had been quietly monitoring Carver's finances, cross-referencing HOA fines with county property records. "Daniel," her message began, "I've found anomalies. Multiple families have been fined for violations that don't exist. Trees that were never cut, fences that never moved, docks that met every safety code. Carver's building a paper trail, and she's using these fines to pressure sales. I've documented everything in spreadsheets. If we organize this, it's more than harassment. It's criminal." Daniel felt a rush of determination. They weren't just fighting a bully, they were unraveling a deliberate conspiracy. That evening, as twilight settled over the lake, Daniel coordinated a plan with Tom, Eleanor, and a few trusted neighbors. Infrared cameras, motion sensors, and carefully timed stakeouts were deployed throughout the neighborhood. Every mailbox, driveway, and property line became a point of observation. The first strike came at 11:17 p.m., precisely as Daniel had predicted. A car slowed near the Henderson property. 2 figures emerged, carrying a large duffel bag and moving cautiously. Daniel observed silently, heart pounding. The intruders were methodical, checking for cameras, avoiding the streetlights, communicating through whispered hand signals. Through night vision binoculars, Daniel noticed the bag contained what looked like documents and a small laptop. The Hendersons' home office had been a target. Daniel whispered into his radio, "Tom, intercept and contain. Do not engage directly. Let's get identification." Moments later, Tom and 2 local deputies hidden along the property line approached. The intruders froze, startled by voices in the shadows. One dropped a flashlight, revealing their faces partially. Daniel recognized them as the same petty criminals from downtown he had been warned about. They froze when Daniel's voice called out, "Step away from the property!" The men attempted to flee, but deputies apprehended them within seconds. Once detained, one of the intruders, trembling, began to speak. We were hired by Carver. She said to plant these. Call it suspicious activity. Make it look like the homeowners were hiding evidence." Daniel's jaw tightened. Carver's audacity had no limits. She was now orchestrating staged crimes to frame families, a step beyond intimidation, beyond harassment, into outright criminal activity. The following day, Daniel met with the Parker family to review evidence. Alex, now more composed but still wary, provided crucial information: letters, emails, and photos of HOA notices. Each document was meticulously cataloged. "She's watching every move," Alex said quietly. "Every phone call, Every action, it's like she knows what we're going to do before we do it. Daniel nodded grimly. He remembered a principle drilled into him during years of intelligence work. Patterns reveal the mind of the adversary. Carver's obsession with control had made her predictable. She believed fear was the ultimate weapon, but her arrogance was her weakness. By afternoon, Daniel contacted the local police liaison, Officer Johnson. "We have tangible evidence of staged break-ins, harassment, and fraudulent documentation," he said. Johnson, a veteran officer with years on the force, listened carefully. "I'll escalate this. Carver is crossing legal lines. We can act." Meanwhile, Eleanor Henderson had uncovered more financial irregularities. Carver had quietly diverted HOA funds into accounts controlled by shadow companies she created. Families who resisted her fines were subtly targeted through inflated property assessments, manipulated permits, and bogus complaints filed with city agencies. The scope was larger than Daniel had imagined, a small empire of intimidation. Night fell again, bringing with it a tense calm. Daniel reviewed every detail on his laptop, plotting their next move. Carver was becoming desperate, and desperation made people reckless. They just needed to act at the right moment. At 2:14 a.m., an alert from one of the motion sensors triggered. Daniel grabbed the binoculars. A figure moved stealthily near the Parkers' garage. It was Carver herself, or so the infrared revealed. She carried what appeared to be papers and a small briefcase. The shadows masked her features, but the posture, the careful, deliberate movements, it was unmistakable. Daniel felt a surge of adrenaline. This was the moment to act. He whispered into the radio, coordinating with Tom and Officer Johnson. Tonight they would catch the orchestrator herself, not just the pawns. Minutes stretched like hours. Carver moved with precision, unaware of the net closing around her. Then, a loud click. The infrared camera had recorded her entering the garage. Daniel, hiding in the trees, watched as she placed the briefcase and slipped away. Tom and Johnson moved quickly, intercepting her at the back exit. "Linda Carver, step away from the property," Johnson shouted. Carver froze, a flicker of panic crossing her face, before realizing she was trapped. Daniel emerged from the shadows, calm but authoritative. "Major General Harper," Carver said, voice trembling, a hint of disbelief in her tone. You can't do this." Daniel didn't reply. He simply gestured to the briefcase, the staged documents, the evidence of every scheme meticulously recorded over the past weeks. Tonight, the predator of Clearwater Lake had been caught in her own trap. The dawn over Clearwater Lake that morning carried a sense of uneasy calm. Families slept a little easier, knowing the forces of justice had begun their work. Daniel Harper, however, knew this was only the beginning. Carver's web was vast, her influence deep, but he had patience, allies, and experience, and he would see this through to the very end. The war for Clearwater Lake was far from over, but tonight, the first decisive victory had been won. The morning sun broke over Clearwater Lake with deceptive calm. Birds chirped and mist curled above the water, but the serenity was a fragile illusion. Inside Darius's cabin, the atmosphere was tense and electric. Every surface was covered with files, laptops, and printed emails, a testament to the relentless investigation that had consumed the past week. Kyle moved between stations, headphones on, monitoring incoming communications, his eyes darting between financial documents and security feeds. Darius sipped his coffee, watching his old military instincts kick in. Strategy meetings in war zones had never been this precise, or so much quieter. Yet the stakes were just as high. Brenda Whitmore's criminal enterprise had extended into every possible leverage point: property manipulation, financial exploitation, false police complaints, and an intricate network of local contacts ready to bend rules in her favor. And now, federal authorities were beginning to tighten the net. A knock on the cabin door drew Darius's attention. Officer Johnson stepped in, uniform crisp, a digital tablet in hand. "Major General Mitchell," he said with a crisp salute. "We intercepted new communications from Brenda. She's trying to liquidate assets across 3 counties, likely to fund her legal defenses. I've also cross-checked with the county assessor. She's been inflating property taxes on families she deems vulnerable. This is systemic fraud at a multi-million-dollar scale." Darius exhaled slowly. The pieces were falling into place, each revelation heavier than the last. "How many families are affected?" he asked, leaning over the tablet. "Preliminary count. 12 confirmed across Clearwater and neighboring communities. That's just the ones we've identified. There could be more." Johnson's voice was steady, but the weight of the situation was palpable. Kyle, perched on a chair near the table, suddenly froze. "Dad, look at this," he said, pointing at a chain of emails from Brenda to a mysterious figure identified only as Mr. Joseph. "She's coordinating timelines, creating artificial crises, threatening families with fines timed with property tax hikes, and even manipulating HOA boards to expedite forced sales." His voice carried a mix of awe and horror. "This isn't just harassment. It's a calculated criminal operation." Darius nodded grimly, his mind racing. Each email, spreadsheet, and recorded call was a battlefield intelligence report. Every act Brenda committed added to the mounting federal case. "This is beyond local jurisdiction," he muttered. "We're looking at federal civil rights violations, conspiracy, wire fraud, and potentially RICO statutes if her network extends further." By mid-afternoon, Darius coordinated with Colonel Sarah Martinez from Military Legal Assistance. Her call came with that sharp, commanding tone that left no room for error. "Darius, I've reviewed the documents you sent. This case is unprecedented in scope. We need to move fast. Brenda is panicking, and desperate people make mistakes that can be exploited legally. Let's set traps for every financial maneuver and every attempt at coercion." Meanwhile, Brenda, completely unaware that every action was being watched, continued her campaign. Anonymous complaints flooded local agencies, designed to overwhelm inspectors, health officials, and code enforcement officers. Her goal was simple: create chaos, delay federal intervention, and pressure Darius into compliance. Yet each complaint was meticulously logged by Kyle, whose teenage determination now rivaled seasoned investigators. Night fell, and the fog over the lake thickened, creating a surreal, almost cinematic scene. Darius and Kyle huddled over laptops, reviewing security footage. At 11:45 p.m., motion sensors triggered along the dock. Shadows moved silently, and infrared cameras revealed 2 men carrying suspicious parcels. Brenda's hired operatives attempting yet another sabotage. Darius dialed Officer Johnson with precision. "They're on the move," he whispered. "Intercept and detain." Within minutes, law enforcement arrived, apprehending the men and extracting confessions. The operatives revealed Brenda as the orchestrator, implicating her directly in the planned intrusion and financial manipulations. Kyle meticulously documented each statement, knowing that federal prosecutors would need airtight evidence. The following morning brought further revelations. Kyle uncovered digital forensics proving that Brenda had forged multiple signatures on family court documents to manipulate custody and legal authority. Emails, voice recordings, and time-stamped files painted a clear picture. This wasn't opportunistic. It was organized, malicious, and criminally calculated. Darius called a strategy session with Martha, Eleanor Henderson, Tom Bradley, and Officer Johnson. "Brenda's network is extensive, but every overreach strengthens our case," he explained. "She's isolating families, manipulating finances, and trying to weaponize government agencies. But with coordination, transparency, and evidence, we can dismantle her entire operation." Late afternoon, federal investigators arrived in Clearwater. Their presence sent a ripple of tension through the community, but it also provided a sense of protection and validation. Kyle felt a weight lift from his shoulders, knowing that justice was now moving through the proper channels. Brenda, sensing her financial and legal empire collapsing, made her final, desperate gambit. She attempted to intimidate Darius with threats of personal harm and legal harassment, hoping to disrupt the investigation. Yet every action was anticipated. Surveillance, documentation, and coordination with law enforcement ensured that each move was countered, captured, and added to the growing mountain of evidence. By evening, a turning point arrived. Kyle discovered that Brenda's hidden debts and asset transfers were now exposed to federal scrutiny. Banks froze accounts, property transfers were halted, and legal consequences began cascading. Darius felt the thrill of seeing a long-term operation unravel under meticulous strategy and discipline. The suspense reached its peak late that night. As Darius watched the lake in the near darkness, he realized the battle had entered its final stage. Brenda's desperation, once calculated, was now erratic, dangerous, and fully traceable. Every attempt to manipulate, intimidate, or commit fraud now served only to tighten the noose. By the end of Chapter 4, the stage was set for a dramatic public confrontation. Brenda's criminal empire exposed, federal charges imminent, and the community finally rallying in defense of justice. Clearwater Lake remained serene on the surface, but beneath it, the currents of truth, courage, and retribution swirled violently, ready to break into the climactic showdown. The morning air over Clearwater Lake was crisp, carrying the smell of pine and the faint hint of lake water. Birds chirped, but there was a tension in the air, an almost electric anticipation. Word had spread overnight. Federal marshals were on the way, and the entire community was bracing for what was coming. Darius stood on his rebuilt dock, scanning the calm water, but his mind was a whirlwind. Every piece of evidence, every report, and every calculated move Brenda had made was now being countered with precision. Kyle arrived early, carrying the final digital files of Brenda's operations: emails, forged signatures, video recordings, financial spreadsheets, and surveillance logs. He moved with quiet purpose, the same intensity he had maintained throughout this battle. "Dad," he said, handing over a secure USB. "This is everything. Federal prosecutors and the state commission will need all of it. This is the smoking gun." Darius nodded, feeling a mixture of pride and relief. The kid had grown beyond his teenage uncertainty. He was now a meticulous investigator and a courageous advocate for justice. "Good work, son. Every detail counts." By mid-morning, residents from Clearwater and neighboring communities began arriving at the community center. Families previously displaced, elderly couples who had been forced from their homes, and military families affected by Brenda's harassment gathered, many still bearing the scars of financial strain and emotional trauma. They came with stories, evidence, and a quiet determination to reclaim their lives. Inside the community center, Darius and Kyle coordinated with federal marshals, the State Real Estate Commission, and local law enforcement. Each agency had a role. Federal marshals would serve the criminal indictment, the state commission would revoke Brenda's license, and the community board would hold the historic removal vote. The room buzzed with controlled chaos, volunteers sorting documents, residents rehearsing testimony, and tech teams ensuring recordings and evidence were ready for display. By noon, Brenda arrived, escorted by federal marshals. Her designer clothing was wrinkled, her hair disheveled, and her eyes wild with a mix of anger, fear, and disbelief. The room fell silent as she entered, her presence a stark reminder of the fear and chaos she had inflicted over months. She scanned the room, her gaze landing briefly on Kyle. The boy's expression was resolute. No plea, no cry for loyalty, only moral clarity. Federal prosecutor Amanda Joseph, standing at the front, began addressing the crowd. "Ladies and gentlemen," she said firmly. "Today we hold Mrs. Brenda Whitmore accountable for systematic housing discrimination, conspiracy, wire fraud, mail fraud, and civil rights violations. Evidence shows a pattern of targeting military families, elderly residents, and minorities, forcing below-market property sales through harassment, intimidation, and fraudulent legal proceedings. Total damages exceed $4.2 million across 3 states." The crowd murmured, some gasping at the sheer scope of Brenda's crimes. Darius's chest tightened as he scanned the room. Families he had helped organize, those who had been terrorized by Brenda's tactics, nodded in quiet relief, their presence a silent acknowledgement of justice finally catching up. State District Attorney Michael Rodriguez stepped forward. "In addition to federal charges," he said, voice resonating with authority, "Mrs. Whitmore faces state charges for attempted bribery, false police reports, perjury, forgery, and conspiracy to commit fraud. Maximum state prison time is 25 years, assuming federal authorities don't claim jurisdiction first. Every step she took to manipulate, intimidate, and coerce is now documented and actionable." Brenda's attorney whispered frantically in her ear, but her client's expression had shifted from shock to rage. She opened her mouth to speak, but was immediately interrupted by community testimony. Eleanor Henderson, her voice steady despite years of suppressed pain, stepped forward. "Brenda Whitmore destroyed my family. We lost our home, savings, and children's stability. Tonight, I reclaim my life and my dignity." Tom Bradley spoke next, representing the American Legion. "She targeted veterans, believing PTSD made us weak. She was wrong. We organize and we protect each other. Justice will prevail." One by one, displaced families shared their experiences. Elderly couples forced into substandard housing, young families bankrupted by legal fees, military veterans harassed for their service. Each story built a mosaic of Brenda's calculated cruelty, turning her own press conference into a public reckoning. Martha delivered the decisive words, her voice a mix of fury and resolution. "This woman is a cancer on our community. She poisoned neighbors against each other, destroyed families for profit, and corrupted everything decent about lakefront living. Enough is enough." Finally, Kyle stood, his teenage voice carrying across the silent room. "My mother taught me to be honest, work hard, and treat people fairly. Then she became someone who violated every lesson she ever gave me. I love my mom, but I can't support what she's done to innocent families." The crowd held its breath as Brenda's eyes found Kyle. The betrayal, amplified by months of manipulation, hit her like a physical blow. Tears, part rage, part self-pity, ran down her face, but there was no remorse, only disbelief that her carefully constructed empire had crumbled. Officer Johnson provided a final satisfying moment. "Sir," he said, saluting Darius, "Mrs. Whitmore filed 47 false police reports about you and other residents. On behalf of the Sheriff's Department, I apologize for not recognizing the pattern sooner." The removal vote for the HOA board was anticlimactic. 127 votes for Brenda's removal, 8 against, and 3 abstentions. New elections followed immediately. Martha was elected president unanimously, Tom Bradley became enforcement coordinator, and Eleanor Henderson took treasurer duties with a mandate to audit every financial transaction from the past 3 years. As federal marshals prepared to transport Brenda to detention, she managed one final outburst. "You people don't understand. I was trying to improve property values, maintain community standards. Everything I did was legal under HOA authority." Prosecutor Joseph, with surgical precision, delivered the final line. "Ma'am, systematic housing discrimination isn't a property management strategy. It's a federal crime. Your community standards violated the Fair Housing Act, the Civil Rights Act, and basic human decency." The room erupted in applause. The suburban dictatorship Brenda had maintained was finally dismantled, not by one person alone, but by an organized, resilient community willing to stand up against corruption and abuse. 6 months later, Clearwater Lake had transformed. Darius sat on his rebuilt dock, sipping coffee as Kyle practiced fly casting with precise, focused determination. Brenda's guilty plea had resulted in 8 years federal prison and $4.2 million restitution, funds now being used to restore the lives she had damaged. Martha's HOA reforms promoted community building over fear, Eleanor's financial audits ensured transparency, and Tom Bradley's Veterans Breakfast became a weekly hub of support. The Clearwater Veterans Scholarship Fund, funded by Brenda's forfeited proceeds, had already provided scholarships to multiple military children, with Kyle as its first recipient. The lake reflected the purple hues of sunset, calm and restored. Kyle, now confident and morally grounded, shared his plans with Darius. "I want to major in military law at the academy," he said, eyes bright. "I can do more good with law and military training combined." Darius smiled, pride swelling. "The backbone to do what's right when everything's on the line. That's already within you." Neighbors laughed, shared stories, and celebrated genuine community. Justice had prevailed, and Clearwater Lake stood as a testament to courage, organization, and the enduring power of standing together against tyranny. The loons called across the water, echoing the victory of truth, courage, and resilience. The community had fought back, and the lesson was clear. No bully, no corrupt system, and no intimidation could survive the strength of united, vigilant neighbors. The sun had barely risen over Clearwater Lake, yet the tension in the Harper cabin felt heavier than the thick morning fog. Major General Daniel Harper sat at his desk, reviewing the night's security footage on a large monitor. His jaw tightened with each frame. Carver had escalated. What began as subtle harassment had become criminal orchestration, and now every move had to be precise. A knock at the cabin door pulled Daniel from his thoughts. It was Kyle, holding a small stack of papers and a USB drive. His face, pale but resolute, reflected both fear and determination. "Sir," he said quietly, "I went through Mom's files last night. There's more than we thought. Emails, voice recordings, even bank transfers. She's trying to cover everything, but I think we've got her pattern." Daniel took the USB, inspecting the files. Every HOA fine, every complaint, every communication with city and county officials had been logged meticulously. The network Carver had built was intricate, a web of intimidation, fraud, and manipulation. But there was a flaw. Every system she built relied on secrecy and obedience, and secrecy had its cracks. By mid-morning, Daniel convened a war council at the cabin. Eleanor Henderson, armed with spreadsheets and cross-referenced records, spread documents across the dining table. Tom Bradley, a veteran with battlefield instincts sharper than most civilians' nerves, paced the floor, coffee in hand. "Here's what we know," Daniel began, his voice low but commanding. "Carver has 3 main streams of control: financial pressure, legal harassment, and staged intimidation. Each family targeted has variations of these threats applied in sequence. If we can anticipate the order, we can disrupt her cycle." Eleanor chimed in. "I've mapped the financial anomalies: properties sold below market value, bank accounts linked to shell corporations, unrecorded cash transfers. Everything points back to Carver. If we coordinate with law enforcement, this isn't just harassment. It's conspiracy, wire fraud, and potential racketeering." Tom rubbed his chin thoughtfully. "We've got a moral high ground, yes, but she's ruthless. She's proven she won't hesitate to escalate. Property sabotage, forged documents, even intimidation of witnesses. We need to be careful." Daniel nodded. "Tonight we draw her out." Evening fell like a curtain, the lake reflecting the fiery hues of sunset. Daniel, Kyle, Tom, and Eleanor positioned themselves at strategic points. The Parker family, now allies, kept watch over their property while maintaining a low profile. Motion sensors and hidden cameras recorded every street corner and driveway. As darkness deepened, headlights appeared on the horizon. A black SUV slowed near the Henderson property. A figure stepped out. Carver herself, clipboard in hand, seemingly inspecting her latest targets. The infrared cameras tracked her every movement. She paused, checking the street, then turned toward the property with an unnerving precision. Daniel whispered into his radio, "Team, positions." She's making her move. Remember, observation, patience, no direct confrontation unless necessary. Carver moved with purpose, yet the trap had been set. Motion sensors alerted Daniel, and hidden floodlights cast subtle illumination on the property perimeter. She didn't notice the cameras, the strategically placed neighbors, or the waiting law enforcement allies.